Welcome to Secure Insights, the only podcast where you can hear about the latest cybersecurity issues, quick hacks, and trending IAM products directly from the industry's top data security experts. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. This is Jeannie Jessica, and you're listening to Secure Insights, a series of conversation with industry experts, influencers, and leaders in the cybersecurity space. We are back. Yes, we are back with the second part of our podcast on how to build a cybersecurity culture in your organization. So, guys, Dan Lohrmann is here with us, and as we promised to you all, today, Dan is going to dive more into this topic and give us few tips and tricks, industry insights, and resources on cybersecurity culture. Okay, so I won't give out much information for now. So instead of that, let's hear it straight from Dan himself. So for that, let's start this session. Okay, Dan. So let me start this by asking about a topic because of which the entire world has suffered: COVID-19. The first thing which comes to my mind when I hear COVID-19 is work from home. Due to this unfortunate pandemic, organizations have shifted to work from home policy. Creating a cybersecurity culture becomes both more important and challenging when employees work at home. So, what solutions would you give to these organizations?
Yeah, I think COVID-19 has really shifted the message for many organizations and most people now working from home and maybe a hybrid environment. Now, many people moving back to the office, and so it's a hybrid, maybe 1 or 2 days a week and 2 or 3 days at home. Again, this is another whole topic we could spend another hour on. We've done whole panels just on this topic. What has COVID meant for cybersecurity? What has the pandemic meant for cybersecurity? But as people work from home, some of the quick challenges that are out there, people may be using home equipment, maybe not having the policies in place that apply to work. So you're doing more bring your own device or use your own device, your own network, bring your own network, use your own network, use your own laptop, use your own desktop. Many people are sharing with their children who might be doing school from home. There are challenges with encryption, virtual private networks. How do you communicate well? I mean, many of them are doing virtual desktops, VDI, but they're doing basically trying to, basically imitate their work environment at home. And I think the challenges about culture apply even more so because you really need to say and maybe adjust the policies, adjust the people, the process, and the technology. And many companies had to do that as part of COVID. They had to think about a new way of getting things done. Many organizations have done very well at that. They've kind of moved to more digital processes, less paperwork. We've been talking about the paperless office. I think I taught a class at University of Maryland in Europe when I was in England in the early 90s on, we're going to get to the paperless office. That was 30 years ago. So we're not, we're not there. We're not there yet. We still a lot of paper, but more and more things have become digitized. But I think the reality is that cybersecurity needs to be built into every single one of those processes. So it really needs to be thought about, when you think about each piece of technology, from the laptop, the desktop, the end user, the smartphone, the apps, the encryption that's connecting them to your systems. Also, your cloud architecture. We haven't talked a lot about cloud. More and more organizations are moving data to the cloud. They're moving applications to the cloud, which can be a very good thing. So when they went to a remote environment, you had, basically, they already had, say, O365, Microsoft Office 365. They already had those in place. So it was much easier for them to go to work from home. The challenges are, really protecting that end-to-end environment and thinking not just about one piece of that. A lot of organizations will say, well, I use Google, I use Microsoft, I use AWS in the cloud, and that's secure. Well, they may in fact be maybe their data center is secure, maybe that server, that physical hardware is secure, but is your end-to-end process, is your configuration secure? Thinking through each of those pieces in the end-to-end flow of data for every business process is a daunting task. It's really daunting. And so I think the challenges are there. So then the solutions have to be, and I think many of them have done this over the last 12 to 18 months, redesign how do we do end-to-end security, with a zero trust model in mind. And I think that has been really the message over the last 18 months in COVID. And I think it will continue on certainly here as we move into a hybrid environment over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yes. The challenge of culture applies even more in work from home environment. Because the most obvious risk is that most of our tasks are conducted online. And after all, if something's on the internet, then there's always the possibility of a cyber criminal compromising it. So to avoid such situation, we should focus more on redesigning of end-to-end security by adopting zero trust model. News these days is filled with companies that have been targeted by hackers and have inadequate security set in place. What would be your message to those companies, and how can a company put rules in place to avoid such situations?
Yeah, I think great question. I think it starts really going back to where we kind of began the whole conversation, and that is the importance of cybersecurity. It still is amazing to me how many people fall because they don't think it's going to happen to them. I think in 2021, we've had so many, headline grabbing data breaches around Colonial Pipeline and I keep saying that one example, but I think that was a turning point when we had gas lines in the southeast part of the United States that got the world's attention in a new way. JBS Meats as well, JBS, others ransomware, but hospitals that have been hit, in Ireland, shutting down the NHS in Ireland. These global attacks, and they've hit small hospitals and large hospitals. They've hit, and we don't even know all of them, because I think it's hard to know exactly what the percentage is, but a large percentage of ransomware attacks or data breaches are never even reported to the authorities, never make the papers. And so the first message would be, it can happen to you. Cybersecurity is a core part of your business. I think that was a message at the summit that the president just had with big tech, this week. Is really that, it's for everyone, and it involves cyber insurance. It involves, your technology. It involves the people, process, and technology. So, really includes, training your people well. We'll talk about that in a few moments. It involves a process that's repeatable. I hear this all the time as well from companies. Well, we did that 3 years ago, or we did that a year ago. That, we've already checked that box. Well, cybersecurity is not it's not a one-time check the box, move on kind of thing. It's a constantly evolving. The bad actors, maybe yesterday you did stop them. Great, good job. But they've adapted their attacks, and now they're doing something different. And maybe tomorrow you're not going to be able to stop them with the same level of security. So this is a moving target. Which it makes it very, very difficult. It's not just something you can check and say, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, as we say in the US, check the box, move on to do something else. Cybersecurity is a core part. It's like customer service in a sense. You can always improve, and it's something you have to constantly do every single day. And you can improve in as a culture in your company, and it needs to be part of the way you do business.
Listeners, as Dan just mentioned, cybersecurity is core of our business. We cannot get away with it. And also, training our employees is one of the ways how we can build cybersecurity culture. I think security awareness training for your employees would be a nice idea. Okay, so this leads me to ask you about the resources which organizations can use to train their employees.
Yeah, great question. And I think, I work for Security Mentor. We're a security awareness training company ourselves. And, I think having an end user security awareness training program is really essential. but not just a check the box program. Many security programs, people say, yeah, Dan, we've been doing that for years and nobody really pays attention to it. It's kind of boring. It's irrelevant. It doesn't apply to me. It's somebody else's job. It's not really very effective. So we tell people your security program needs to be brief, frequent, and focused. Brief, frequent, focused. And that is, we do like a 10-minute lesson every month, year round, and on a single topic. So, maybe we're talking about passwords this month. The next month we're talking about phishing. It needs to be gamified. It needs to be interactive and engaging. You need training that is really effective, interactive, engaging. That people say also, teach me something I don't already know. So, people don't want to keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again. So many people have told me, Dan, I just keep hearing, don't click on links, click on links. That's not effective. They have to click on some links. You're trying to use the internet, right? I mean, how do you train people and really give them knowledge that they can use in a fun, engaging way? So you can actually, if you train well, you can actually make your frontline employees advocates. And this is very hard because, for many organizations to believe me on this, but it's true. I talk to security pros. Usually the security team in many organizations is thought of as the ones who always say no. They're the ones who always, whatever the project is, the answer is no. What was the question? The answer is no. They're always like shutting things down and turning things off. Well, awareness training is one area where you can enable the end user and really help them be more effective in their home life, in their family, and also, of course, at work, in their job. And so if you're enabling them, teaching them things they don't already know, making it fun, making it engaging, making it brief, frequent, and focused, making it gamified, and really, which is really what we do at Security Mentor, and you can do that effectively, you can get those end users to say, literally, this is kind of the holy grail, if you will, say thank you. They literally say thank you. Wow, this is great. I love this. I can use this at home. I can use this with my family. I can use this in these different business practices. I can use this at work. And as you do that, then all of a sudden they're like supporting you and they're actually helping you. So having a real effective end user security awareness training program can really, really help build that culture of cybersecurity.
When we talk about cybersecurity, we cannot miss out identity and access management. So Dan, what is the role of IAM in cybersecurity from an organization's point of view?
Yeah, when you talk about identity management, identity and access management, it really is central. And I just start with maybe a quick little story. And when you think about a number of the ransomware attacks, a number of the attacks and data breaches that have hit the United States from the Colonial Pipeline, I mentioned JBS, but you talk about lots of state and local governments being hit, cities being hit, counties being hit, other organizations, hospitals being hit. In many cases, the way that's happening today, and the way that the bad actors, the gangs, if you will, I won't start going through the listing all the different ransomware gangs, but the people that are actually putting the ransomware in the systems from around the world are getting access with credentials from the dark web in many cases. So regardless of how good your passwords are, maybe they're not using two-factor authentication. In several cases I know of, that certainly happened with Colonial Pipeline and some others, where they were able to get the credentials off the dark web, and they were somehow they were stolen. I'm not going to go into that right now, but whether a database was hacked, somehow the credentials get stolen, maybe an insider threat, but those credentials are on the dark web, and then without two-factor authentication, people can literally log in with the username and password. In some cases, it is actually being used by the actual organization themselves, by the system administrators. That's just one example, but it's just trying to show the importance of identity and access management. As we talk about zero trust, as we talk about, building a different architecture, which has been advocated really globally, and zero trust is really kind of another podcast for another day, but IAM is a central component of that everything, every interaction, needs to be verified. And that means multi-factor authentication. That means using really good provisioning, knowing who has access to what. It's a central component. It's a much needed area of improvement for most organizations. And knowing, even I can't tell you how many organizations I talk to, their Active Directory is not even accurate, up to date. They can't keep track of, entering and exiting employees and who has access to what. And making sure that people, after they leave the organization, don't have access, even 3-6 months later. I mean, again, identity and access management is a core component of that, and it's really needed in order to really be able to build an architecture with zero trust. But even if you're not in a zero trust, architecture, just from a basic cybersecurity culture perspective, having an IAM program, whatever tools and products you use, is essential.
Yes, effective IAM strategies from single sign-on to multi-factor authentication can definitely help mitigate risks in the organizations. So Dan, moving forward, is there any difference between how public and private sector organizations approach cybersecurity?
I think overall, there's a lot of the same principles. There's a lot of similarities. I think there are quite a few differences between the public and private sector as well. The challenge is, I will say, the commonalities, the threat landscape is huge. Being a target, many times government organizations are targets of, it could be nation state attackers. Ransomware is hitting public and private sector. The number of threats and challenges is huge. I think in the public sector, there are a number of differences that are unique, especially, I've worked with CISOs, and I've been a CISO in the private sector now for over 7 years, and was in the CISO for the state of Michigan and CSO for the state of Michigan, actually working at Michigan government for 17 years overall. And I think from a budgeting perspective, most private sector organizations spend more and have more flexibility than the public sector, than governments. Certainly, I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges out there today is staffing, and people talk a lot about pay and benefits. I think that is a big challenge for governments to keep qualified staff. When they get trained up and they're good, a lot of times they leave. I've talked to a lot of CISOs that are really struggling to keep their top talent. They're being attracted away to the private sector. I think that's a big challenge. I also think in the budgeting in the public sector is different. A lot of times it's what we call fiscal year budgeting. I can tell you lots of times, and I was in government, and I think this still exists out there, you have, everything is kind of time boxed. And what I mean by that is, like, you have to spend it by a certain deadline. And there were many times where I had no money, like all year, no money. And then our finance director would come in my office and say, you got a week to spend $1 million because this money's gonna lapse. We're not gonna have it. So the way that they do budgeting, the way that they fund projects can be very different in the public sector than the private sector. And those are some challenges, but there are also some advantages as well, because the public sector can get grants many times from, like, Department of Homeland Security, and there's new legislation now offering literally like $1 billion in grants to state and local governments. It's going through right now as part of the infrastructure package in Washington. That money is going to be available to state and local governments that not going to be available to the private sector. So from a grant perspective, from an ability to work with other governments and partner, certainly public and private sector need to partner. I think the president just had a big summit in Washington with a lot of the leaders of Apple and Microsoft and Google, and talked about more. We've been talking about public-private partnership for years, but that's going to continue, and that there's a lot of similarities. But again, I think government needs to rely on the private sector to help in new ways, because right now, I think from a resource perspective, oftentimes, especially smaller governments, struggle to basically keep good staff and to be able to really manage their cybersecurity programs.
What kind of challenges have you personally experienced in your mission to instruct individuals about network protection? And if there were any challenges, then how did you manage those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been quite a few challenges. I think I think it starts with a basic understanding for people at a very simple level of just um, helping them, educating them on something as simple as two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Um, I think different studies said about a couple of years ago it was like less than 10% of Americans use two-factor authentication, even though it was free. I'm talking about even for home apps. So using it for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, for Gmail, for email, for home networks, for Yahoo. It was you can't beat the price, right? Free. I start there. I know we're talking about business. I'll get back to that in a minute, but if people understand the value just at a very basic level, most people say that's too hard. I don't want to have two factors. I just want to have a password. I want easy. I want simple. I want fast. I want efficient, and that's great. But you say, it doesn't have to be hard to do two-factor authentication. I certainly wouldn't do online banking. I often get that question: do you do online banking? And I say, yes, I do, because I have two-factor authentication. So if somebody gets my password from the dark web, and they use it, they try to log in as me. If they get my username and password, I hope they don't. I would change it. But if they do, I'm going to get a text to my phone, and it's going to it's going to tell me that someone's trying to log into my account. I'm going to get notified by email as well. So at a very basic level, helping people understand the value of multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, turning that on. It's free for the apps they already use, like email, social media websites, sites like LinkedIn and Facebook, and Twitter and others online. Use two-factor when it's available. And I think that's been a challenge to help people understand, because if they understand it at that level, then they're going to understand it more at work. Because I think the other challenges you find is, I was going to mention on this, is as you work with business staff, they've got deadlines. They're like, I want to get this app rolled out. I want to get this project done. I've got to be done by September 1st. I've got to be done by October 1st. And if they, if I try and add this extra level of security, if I try to add this extra level of IAM, network protection, it's going to slow down the project. And so you have this tension that's going on. That's why it's really important to be involved at the beginning. That security needs to be built in from the start of projects, not be an inhibitor at the end. And always be the one that's asking, that they're coming in and asking for an exception. We used to always have that so much anymore, but it would come in at the last minute and ask for, punch this hole through the firewall so we can get this project working. The governor needs it by Monday, kind of thing. So that means you failed when you have to have exceptions, lots of exceptions, lots of appeals and rules that have to are long and complex. I mean, building security in the beginning of network projects, the beginning of business processes, that's the most effective way. That's going to really enable you to really have a culture of cybersecurity and do it in a way that's a positive thing in the company and not a negative thing.
Okay, Dan. So finally, I would like to ask, what would you say is the most integral part of cybersecurity culture?
Yeah, I mean, they're all important. Everything, we can talk bottom up, getting employee buy-in. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think the number one thing I would have to say is executive buy-in. Starting at the top. If management gets it, if they really believe in it, and they say, we're going to make this a priority, and we're going to walk the talk, and we're going to hold people accountable, and we're going to put the people, process, and technologies in place. We believe in this, and we're going to do it. I think that's the number one piece, is getting that management buy-in. And we could say so much more about that, but I just want to say, right here, I want to mention, I hear a lot this question. Okay, Dan, I agree. It is management buy-in. It's executive support, getting the board support, getting the executive support, that business support from the top. Yeah, that's number one. But what if I don't have it? How can I get it? I get that question a lot. And I just want to give you a couple tips. if you're out there and you're listening to this and you say, my management just doesn't seem to really, they say the right things, but they don't really do what they say. I don't really have the buy-in for this project I'm trying to do, for this IAM project, for this important security program. The first thing I tell people is get on boats that are leaving the dock. And what I mean by that is, you say, I don't have a boat. Everyone's going out to that island out there. There's a big body of water between us. How do I get out there? Well, get on one of the other boats. There's other boats leaving the dock. And what does that mean in practical terms? There's always things being funded. There are always projects that are top priorities. Find out what those top priorities are in your company or in your government. I mean, one thing about government, I've been involved for over 30 years, there's always money being spent on something. So making sure that your security team is involved in those projects. Maybe they won't want to give you an enterprise-wide IAM solution or an enterprise-wide encryption solution, but maybe they will have funding for that new tax system or that new, Medicare, Medicaid system, whatever it might be you're working on, or maybe that, different, whatever app you're working on in your company that's a top priority. Making sure security is built into those projects. So that's really one thing you can do. But as far as getting the executives to support you, two other tips I'd like to give. One, look for advocates. In almost every organization, there's someone at the top, some management, some executive that really is a supporting, call them a champion, somebody who's really going to advocate for cybersecurity. Talk with that person. Find out, maybe they had their identity stolen. Maybe there's something personal in their lives that this is important to them. And, utilize those relationships. And really, I tell people, you're always going to have your leaders, your followers, and your laggards. So work with the leaders, and once the leaders lead, then the followers will follow. And then eventually, it becomes part of the culture and the laggards will get on board the boat because the time comes and they feel like they have to get involved. So, really work with those leaders, those champions in your organization that do want to support it. And then lastly, if you have an executive, maybe a senior team, just doesn't want to seem to listen to you. Maybe you're the wrong messenger. Maybe you need to work, I call it work with a peer. I can tell you a quick story. We had a situation in Michigan. This is going back more than a decade, but the model will still work today. Where we wanted one agency director that just didn't seem to get cybersecurity. They didn't do what we wanted to say. They didn't want to listen to us. And for whatever reason, they, were not listening to my team. And what we did was we were able to find out a partner who that individual respected and listened to that was out at another state won't mention the state, but out west. And they thought that state and that director of that agency department did a fantastic job. And we knew they had a very good security program. So we contacted them. We talked to their security team and they said, we did this, and this project. It was all very successful. And our management really buys into that. Well, we talked to them, talked to their team. And then when those two leaders were together at a conference from Michigan and that other state, they talked to each other about, the importance of cybersecurity, and he got the message from this other executive from another organization better than from us, and so it was actually a better messenger. And the interesting thing was, the person came back from that conference. They called me up and they said, "Dan, I want you right over here. I want you in my office. I want to do this project A, B, C, D, E because cybersecurity is really important." It became their idea, which was awesome. And he never even knows, I don't think to this day, that we actually worked through a colleague in a different state to actually get the message over to that person. But there's always somebody that your executive team is listening to. Find out who that is, find out who influences them, and maybe they would be a better messenger to get you the priorities, the funding, the staffing that you need for your security project.
So that was the last question, and we have come to an end of this series of how to build a cybersecurity culture in an organization. Dan, it was a pleasure to have you here as a keynote speaker. Thank you again for joining us and sharing your valuable insights.
Well, thank you. No, I really enjoyed doing it. So I appreciate you asking me, and I look forward to sending me the links when this goes live.
Yes, Yes, definitely. And Dan, I'm very sure that our audience now knows how important it is to build a cybersecurity culture in an organization. Well, I'm hoping for more such interesting conversations around cybersecurity with you. And thank you so much, listeners, for tuning into Secure Insights. We will meet again on our next podcast session. Don't forget to subscribe to Secure Insights if you don't want to miss any updates or episode. Until next time, goodbye.